the commercial banks, the retail banks, we have diversity and we have decentralization. Now, of course, it depends on the country. And some countries have only a small number of banks, and therefore they are very concentrated, like the UK, 5 banks account for most of the deposits, 90%.
Here as well.
But in Germany, there's 1,500 banks.
In America, a lot of banks.
Exactly. In America, there's many small banks, local banks.
4,000 or 5,000 banks.
In Germany, 80% of all banks are not-for-profit local community banks.
Okay.
And that means in such a system, there is local accountability because the local community banks, they only lend locally and you can get involved in various ways. And you can find out what they're doing and you can go to their annual meetings and ask questions. And they won't be able to do really extraordinary bad stuff because there are more real checks and balances. But once an organization gets too large, nobody can supervise them. And that's true for the global big banks. I mean, the regulators have no idea really what's going on. So they just made them systemically relevant, i.e. they will always get bailed out because, they're just already too much ahead, too big and too complicated. The conclusion after the 2008 crisis should really have been, let's make sure we have much more decentralized banking systems with many small banks, because the German banking system, which has the largest number of banks in the whole of Europe by far, also was the most stable one in the 2008 crisis. There was no recession in Germany, no unemployment. Wow. The big banks in Germany, they were the same like in any other country, and they did get into trouble in 2008, and some big banks also in Germany disappeared. Dresdner disappeared, and others, Landesbanken disappeared. These are the big banks. They're the same everywhere. But the difference is that in Germany, they only account for 12-13% of bank deposits. And over 70% of bank deposits are with local community banks. Savings banks, Sparkassen, and cooperative banks, Volksbanken, People's Banks, Raiffeisenbanken, and so on. And that is a whole different story. And as a result, because they did not lose any money in the financial crisis. And because they're small, they can't do the big speculation.
So you say actually that those small banks will be destroyed by the CBDC system.
So the 2008 crisis showed clearly that if you have many small local community banks, that's sound, that's very stable, it's much more resilient to shocks and crises. In Germany, as a result, there was no recession. When the big banks tightened lending as a result of the crisis, everywhere, including in Germany. In Germany, because the big banks are a small minority and most banks are small community banks, they increased their lending to small firms. There was no credit crunch. There was no increase in unemployment, no recession. Whereas in all the other countries where you had the big banks dominating, you had a big shock to the system. It's very, very clear. So the conclusion should have been by the policymakers, we've now learned something. We should actually create many small local banks and have a system more like Germany, which in fact many countries had in the past. I mean, the Netherlands had many, many more cooperative banks, Rabobank, agricultural banks, and community banks. But the central planners always want to centralize. And so sadly, after 2008, they then introduced new rules to prevent such a crisis. And what were these rules? Well, the rules were that you have much more regulation, which small banks can't afford, so they have to merge and they disappear. Thank you. So the result of the post-2008 banking policies has been that in many countries, including in Germany, many small banks were forced out of business because now the regulatory burdens were so high that it's, essentially they said, okay, we have to merge with another bank. The ECB has been driving this, and actually it's an official policy. They admit that they want to kill banks.
Small banks.
They say that there's too many banks, we're overbanked, we have to reduce the number of banks. Now, this is somebody who worked for Goldman Sachs and then became head of the ECB, said that. Surprise, surprise, he didn't think Goldman Sachs should disappear. It is these small local community banks lending to small firms, which are the backbone of the German economy, and the same in Austria, Switzerland, many countries where you still have these local community banks. You really get a thriving economy that's very resilient, and that's where the job creation is. If you give, say, 500,000 euros to a small firm, it will make a big impact, and there will be jobs created. If you give it to a large firm, nothing.
It will disappear in nothing.
There's no increase in employment. So this is actually a great factor to have, employment, and also local wealth creation, because there's the other point that banks are special institutions. They're highly regulated, and partly for a good reason, because they have a license to print money. They're actually creating money. So when you get a bank loan, the money for the bank loan is not from existing deposits. It's not transferred from anywhere inside the bank or outside the bank. The money for a new bank loan is newly created out of nothing. And therefore, then adds to the money supply. So the banks create money. And that means if we have many small local community banks, it is the communities, the local communities that are...
It's local wealth.
That create money. And they will be much more economically resilient and wealthy. And also inequality will be much lower. Whereas in countries where you have small number of very large banks, you get much more inequality, is very clear. And the Mittelstand, the medium-sized companies, they will struggle. Like in the UK, they can't get loans.
The small and medium-sized enterprises, SME.
Because big banks want to do big deals with big companies. So they don't lend to small firms. It's very simple.